Love's unfolding, a family forged in courage. Subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're watching from. The scorching Guadalajara sun relentlessly beat down on the streets of the Chapalita neighborhood as Elena Flores hurried along with her 3-year-old daughter, Lupita. The small one-bedroom apartment they rented became harder to afford each day, ever since Javier, her husband, had passed away 2 years prior in a work accident. The bills piled on the kitchen table were a constant reminder of their precarious situation. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Lupita whined, her curly brown hair sticking to her forehead with sweat. "We're almost there, my love," Elena replied, adjusting the worn backpack on her shoulder. As she opened the door to their modest but impeccably clean apartment, Elena saw the newspaper her neighbor had slipped under the door. In the classified section, an ad stood out. Full-time nanny wanted for 7-year-old twins. Residence in Providencia, excellent remuneration, possibility of live-in accommodation included. Elena's heart raced. The Providencia neighborhood was one of Guadalajara's most exclusive, where elegant mansions rose behind high walls. A position like this would mean a much better salary than she received at the diner where she worked 6 days a week. Gathering her courage, she dialed the number. The male voice on the other end sounded formal and slightly distant. "Sandival residence." "Good morning. I'm calling about the nanny vacancy," she replied, trying to control her nervousness. After a few questions about her experience and qualifications, the man, who identified himself as Ricardo Sandival, scheduled an interview for the next day. When Elena mentioned she would have to bring her daughter, there was an awkward pause before he reluctantly agreed. The next morning, after dressing Lupita in her best little dress and tidying herself with care, Elena took 2 buses to reach the specified address. The Sandival mansion was imposing, with well-maintained gardens and a contemporary facade of elegant lines. The security guard verified her name before allowing entry. A middle-aged housekeeper, who introduced herself as Josefina, led them through the marble entrance hall to a spacious living room. "Mr. Sandival will be down in a moment," Josefina informed them. "The girls are in the playroom." Elena barely had time to absorb the elegance of the surroundings when she heard the sound of a wheelchair approaching. Ricardo Sandival was younger than she had imagined, probably in his 30s, with dark hair beginning to gray at the temples and intense blue eyes. Despite the wheelchair, his posture conveyed authority and an innate dignity. "Miss Flores," he greeted, extending his hand. His eyes briefly observed Lupita, who was partially hiding behind her mother. "This must be your daughter." "Yes, this is Maria Guadalupe, but everyone calls her Lupita." "All right, let's get straight to it," Ricardo continued, gesturing for her to sit. "My daughters, Leticia and Clarissa, are 7 years old. Since the accident that took their mother's life and left me in this chair, they've been difficult with nannies. The last one lasted barely 2 weeks. Elena perceived the poorly disguised pain in his voice when he mentioned the accident. On a nearby table, a photograph showed 2 identical blonde girls, with eyes as blue as their father's, with expressions too serious for such young children. "May I ask what happened to the other nannies?" Elena questioned. "They resigned," Ricardo replied simply. "The girls can be challenging, especially since my sister Clarissa started interfering with their upbringing." At that moment, the sound of glass shattering echoed down the hall, followed by agitated children's voices. Ricardo briefly closed his eyes, as if seeking patience. "That's the sound of my daughters welcoming you," he commented with tired irony. Elena felt that this family was broken in more ways than the obvious, and despite all the uncertainties, something inside her said that these girls needed her as much as she needed this job. "When can I start?" she asked with determination. Ricardo faced her, surprised. "Don't you want to meet the girls first?" "I'll get to know them every day from now on," Elena replied with a confident smile. And I can guarantee one thing, Mr. Sandoval, I'm not one to give up easily. Share your thoughts below. What would you do in Elena's shoes? The move to the Sandival mansion happened quickly. Elena and Lupita were settled into a comfortable suite on the second floor, next to the twins' room. The salary Ricardo offered was 3 times what Elena had earned previously, allowing her to pay off her most urgent debts and even send some money to her parents in the highlands of Jalisco. The first encounter with the twins was exactly as Elena expected. Glacial. Leticia and Clarissa were physically identical, with perfectly styled blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, but Elena soon learned to differentiate them. Leticia was more serious and analytical, while Clarissa, though equally reserved, occasionally let slip glimpses of a more emotional personality. "How many nannies have we had this year, Letty?" Clarissa asked when they were introduced, pretending Elena wasn't even present. "4, Leticia replied coldly. "5, counting this one. How long do you think she'll last?" "Less than the last one. She brought a whiner." Lupita, usually sociable and outgoing, shrunk behind her mother, intimidated by the hostile atmosphere. "Girls," Elena said calmly. "I understand you're used to nannies leaving, but I can guarantee I'm different. I'm not planning on going anywhere." The twins exchanged skeptical glances before returning to their activities, completely ignoring the newcomers. In the following days, Elena discovered the extent of the challenges she would face. The established routine in the house was militarily rigid. The girls woke at 6:30, had breakfast at 8 o'clock, studied with private tutors until noon, and had afternoons packed with scheduled activities like piano, ballet, and swimming. There was no room for spontaneous game or displays of affection. Ricardo was rarely present, always busy with his construction company or locked in his home office. When he did appear for meals, the tension was palpable. The twins became even more silent and contained in their father's presence, as if they feared disappointing him. The first week was marked by small sabotages: salt in the sugar bowl, hidden pillows, Lupita's toys mysteriously disappearing. Elena faced each provocation with calm and firmness, never losing her patience. It was at the end of that week that Elena met Clarissa Sandival, Ricardo's sister. Tall, elegant, and with the same piercing blue eyes as her brother, but significantly colder, Clarissa emerged during dinner, scrutinizing Elena as if evaluating damaged goods. "So you're the new nanny," she commented, her tone falsely sweet, as she watched Lupita quietly playing with her plate. "Interesting choice, Ricardo, bringing such a young child into a home that needs order and discipline." "Elena has excellent references," Ricardo responded defensively, "and so far, Lupita has been no trouble at all." Of course, Clarissa smiled without any warmth. "I just hope you know what you're doing. After everything that's happened, the girls need stability, not more changes." The way she emphasized the word changes, looking directly at Elena, made it clear that she considered her an unwelcome intruder. Later, when the girls were already in bed, Josefina explained the family dynamic to Elena while helping her put away laundry. Mrs. Mariana, Mr. Ricardo's wife, passed away in the same accident that left him paraplegic 3 years ago, she recounted quietly. Miss Clarissa took control of the house while he recovered and never really gave the reins back. She has very rigid ideas about child rearing. She believes discipline is more important than affection. "And Ricardo allows that?" Elena asked, surprised that a man who seemed so strong had ceded so much control. Josefina sighed. "He changed after the accident. Before, he was a present, loving father. Afterward, it's as if he's afraid to get too close, as if he no longer feels capable of being the father the girls need." That night, Elena lay awake for a long time, thinking about the girls sleeping just a few feet away. Girls who lost their mother tragically, whose father was physically present but emotionally distant, and whose aunt confused discipline with coldness. It was no wonder they were so defensive. "It's not going to be easy," she whispered to herself in the dark, "but these girls need someone who won't give up on them." Like this video if you're rooting for Elena and the girls. Don't forget to comment. After 2 weeks at the Sandival mansion, Elena began to implement subtle changes. Instead of directly confronting the established rules, she found small openings to introduce moments of lightness and affection into the twins' routine. During study sessions, she created educational games that transformed learning into something enjoyable. In piano lessons, which the girls clearly detested, she interspersed the obligatory classical pieces with more lively popular songs. Little by little, small smiles began to appear on Letitia and Larissa's faces, though quickly concealed when they realized they were being watched. Lupita, with her affectionate and unfiltered nature, unintentionally became a powerful ally. The twins initially treated her with disdain, calling her whiner, but the little girl's persistence in following them everywhere and her unconditional admiration began to break down their defenses. One afternoon, during piano practice, Elena noticed Letitia watching Lupita, who was dancing awkwardly to the music. "She likes it when you play," Elena commented softly. "She doesn't understand anything about music," Letitia replied, but without her usual hostility. "She understands more than you imagine," Elena smiled. "Look how her body moves to the right rhythm. She feels the music, even if she doesn't know the names of the notes or the composers." Letitia observed the little girl for a moment, a thoughtful expression replacing her usual indifference. To Elena's surprise, the girl began to play a simpler, more cheerful melody, watching with evident satisfaction as Lupita clapped excitedly. It was at this exact moment that Ricardo entered the music room, drawn by the unusual sounds. He stopped at the door, observing the scene with an expression difficult to decipher. Surprise, certainly, but also something that looked like nostalgia. "Daddy!" Letitia exclaimed, immediately stopping the music and returning to the classical piece she should be practicing. The change was so abrupt, it pained Elena. His own daughters were afraid to show joy in their father's presence. "Don't stop because of me," Ricardo said, his voice softer than usual. "What you were playing seemed pleasant." "It was just a silly song," Letitia murmured, looking at the keys. "Aunt Clarissa says I should focus on classical pieces." A flicker of something, frustration, regret, crossed Ricardo's face. "Well, I see no problem in varying the repertoire a bit, as long as you also practice what the teacher assigned." The surprised look Letitia gave her father was revealing. How long had it been since he had given her permission to simply be a child? After that small breakthrough, Elena noticed other subtle changes. Ricardo began to appear more frequently during his daughter's activities, still awkward and uncertain, but visibly trying to reconnect. The twins, though still cautious, occasionally allowed themselves small moments of spontaneity in his presence. One night, Elena was tucking Lupita into bed when she heard a gentle tap on the door. She opened it to find Larissa standing in the hallway, hugging a storybook. "Is something wrong, Larissa?" The girl hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to know if I could read a story to Lupita before she falls asleep." Surprised and touched by the unexpected request, Elena opened the door wider. "Of course you can. I'm sure she'll love it." Larissa entered shyly. Lupita, already in her pajamas, beamed a radiant smile at seeing her. "Laurie, did you come to say goodnight?" Larissa's formality melted slightly with the warm reception. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the book. "I thought you might like this story. It was my favorite when I was your age." As the girl read, her voice gradually losing its stiffness and gaining expressiveness, Elena watched from the doorway, not wanting to interrupt the moment. It was then that she noticed Ricardo standing in the hallway, observing the scene with an expression that mixed surprise and something that looked very much like hope. Their gazes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. Something was changing in that house, slowly but surely. Later, when the girls were asleep, Elena found Ricardo on the back patio, contemplating the illuminated pool. "Thank you," he said simply when she approached. "For what?" "For not giving up. 5 nannies before you tried and failed. Or perhaps we failed them." Elena sat in the chair next to him. "Your daughters are wonderful girls, Ricardo. They just need to feel safe to show it." "I noticed you have a background in pedagogy," he commented, surprising her. "Josefina mentioned she saw your diplomas while tidying your things." "Yes, I graduated before Lupita was born. I dreamed of opening my own little school, but life had other plans," he completed. Understanding. Exactly. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of the night breeze in the palm leaves. "What was it like before?" Elena finally asked. "Before the accident." Ricardo took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "We were happy. Mariana filled this house with music and laughter. The girls were normal children, noisy, sometimes mischievous, but so full of life. And then, afterward, I got lost. In grief, in self-pity, in this chair. I allowed Clarissa to take over because it seemed easier than facing the reality that I would never be the father I used to be." He looked at his own motionless legs. "I let that define who I was, not just physically. It's not too late to change." Ricardo faced her, his eyes intense in the darkness. "Do you really believe that? That people can change, start over?" "I believe it," Elena replied with conviction. "Because I myself had to do that when Javier died. Learn to be 2 people for Lupita, mother and father. Find strength where I thought there was none." "You are an extraordinary woman, Elena Flores," Ricardo said softly. And in that moment, under the Guadalajara stars, something new began to blossom between them. A mutual understanding that went beyond employer and employee. A connection based on shared pains and rekindled hopes. Share your thoughts. How do you find strength in challenging times? On a particularly warm Saturday morning, Ricardo surprised everyone by suggesting time in the pool. It was the first time he had offered to personally supervise an activity with his daughters since Elena arrived. "Can I use my unicorn floaty?" Lupita asked animatedly, as Elena applied sunscreen to her little arms. "Of course, darling." Elena smiled, noticing how the twins watched the interaction with curiosity. Leticia and Larissa were excellent swimmers, a result of the classes they attended 3 times a week. They entered the water with the grace of little mermaids, though they still maintained a certain formality in their father's presence. Ricardo positioned his chair near the edge of the pool, observing his daughters. Elena noticed how his eyes followed their every move, a mixture of pride and vague sadness that she suspected came from the impossibility of joining them in the water. "Daddy, look what I can do!" Larissa called out, performing a perfect dive that took her to the other side of the pool. "That was amazing, princess," Ricardo praised, genuine approval in his voice. The praise had a visible effect on Larissa, whose face lit up with a rarely seen smile. Then, both twins competed for their father's attention, showcasing their aquatic skills with growing enthusiasm. Elena watched the scene with a warm heart, sitting on the edge with her feet in the water, while Lupita played nearby with her floaty. The morning was unfolding perfectly until, in a moment of distraction, Lupita drifted away from the edge, trying to reach a floating toy. In an instant, the little girl slipped from the floaty and sank, her little arms flailing desperately. Elena's heart stopped. She was about to jump into the water when she saw a blonde blur pass her. Larissa dove with impressive speed, reaching Lupita in seconds and bringing her to the surface. "I got you, Lupita!" the girl exclaimed, swimming skillfully to the edge, with the little one safe in her arms. "You don't have to be scared!" Letitia was already there, helping her sister pull Lupita out of the water. The little girl coughed a few times, more scared than hurt. "My love, are you okay?" Elena asked, wrapping her daughter in a towel. "Laurie saved me, Mama," Lupita replied, pointing at Clarissa with admiration. "Just like a real mermaid." Ricardo quickly maneuvered his chair next to them, his face pale with concern. When he was certain Lupita was all right, he turned to Clarissa with an expression of pure pride. "You were so brave and quick, daughter." Clarissa blushed deeply with her father's praise, something clearly rare in her experience. "The swim teacher always says we should help those in danger in the water," she explained shyly. "That was incredible, Laurie," Letitia added, hugging her sister proudly. Elena, recovering from the scare, knelt in front of Clarissa. "Thank you for saving my daughter. You were a true hero today." The girl smiled, unaccustomed to receiving so much praise. "I like Lupita," she said simply. "I didn't want anything bad to happen to her." In that moment, something significant happened in that fragmented family. Larissa's act of courage created a bond that no conversation or therapy could have built. Little Lupita, in her vulnerability and innocence, had awakened the twins' protective instincts in a way that made them open up emotionally for the first time in years. During lunch, the incident was retold several times, each version more heroic than the last. The twins, normally so reserved, laughed and spoke animatedly, occasionally including Lupita in their conversations, as they never had before. Ricardo, noticing the change, took the opportunity to make a proposal. "How about we go to Lake Chapala tomorrow? It's been a long time since we spent a Sunday by the lake." The silence that followed was one of pure disbelief. The twins looked at each other, barely daring to believe what they had heard. "But Daddy, how are you going to—" Letitia began, looking uncertainly at the wheelchair. "There are chairs adapted for the beach," Ricardo explained. "I've already checked, and we can rent one. The tourist area has adapted access for people with disabilities." "Can we really go?" Clarissa asked, hopeful, shining in her eyes. "Of course you can," Elena gently intervened. "It will be a wonderful Sunday for all of us." The joy that lit up the twins' faces was like a ray of sunshine, breaking through heavy clouds. For the first time, Elena saw in them what they should be. Simply children, eager for fun and family love. Later, as the girls went upstairs to change, Ricardo lightly touched Elena's arm, stopping her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For the joy. Well, since before the accident." Elena smiled, covering his hand with hers in an instinctive gesture. "They're wonderful girls, Ricardo. They always were. They just needed a chance to show it." The touch of their hands, simple and brief, sent a current of warmth up Elena's arm, making her heart race in a way it hadn't in a long time. From Ricardo's eyes, she perceived that he had felt the same. The moment was interrupted by Josefina, who entered announcing an important call for Ricardo. When he moved away, Elena remained for an instant there, feeling that something fundamental had changed, not only in the girls, but also between her and their father. What none of them realized was Clarissa observing the scene from the back doorway, her cold eyes calculating every interaction, every exchanged glance. Her face, usually expressionless, briefly contorted into a mask of disgust before she silently retreated, already formulating plans to prevent what she considered a dangerous closeness. Like this video. Comment your thoughts. How can we foster family bonds in difficult times? The Sunday at Lake Chapala was a day of simple joys and profound reconnections. Ricardo, in the amphibious chair adapted for the sand, felt the lake water on his feet for the first time in 3 years. The twins, freed from their usual restrictions, ran on the sand, built elaborate castles, and jumped in the waves with contagious happiness. Lupita followed her like a loyal little admirer, now treated as the official group mascot. Elena observed everything with a full heart, taking photos with her cell phone to document these precious moments. In a particularly moving image, she captured Ricardo smiling broadly, holding his daughter's hands at the water's edge, all three with expressions of pure joy. "It was the best day ever," Clarissa declared on the way back, her face flushed from the sun and her hair still full of sand, despite Elena's attempts to clean it. "Can we come back next Sunday?" Letitia asked, unusually animated. "We'll see," Ricardo replied, but his smile suggested the answer would be positive. That night, exhausted but happy, everyone slept soundly, except for Elena, who lay awake reliving the day's moments in her mind. Something was changing between her and Ricardo. The glances they exchanged lasted longer and longer. Their nightly conversations, after the girls fell asleep, became more personal and meaningful. A connection was blossoming, as unexpected as it was welcome. The next morning, Josefina woke Elena earlier than usual. "Miss Clarissa is here," she informed quietly. "She asked to speak with you in the library. She seems stern." With a bad feeling, Elena dressed quickly and went downstairs. She found Clarissa impeccably dressed, even at that hour, flipping through documents in a folder. "Good morning, Elena," she greeted with false cordiality. "I hope I haven't interrupted your sleep." "Not at all," Elena replied politely. "How can I help you?" "I'll get straight to the point. I know exactly what's going on between you and my brother, and I know exactly what you're after." "And what would that be?" Elena asked, maintaining her composure. "Financial security, of course. A comfortable life for you and your daughter. It's a cunning plan. A lonely widower, insecure about his physical condition, desperate for affection. A perfect target." The insinuation made Elena's blood boil, but she took a deep breath before responding. "You don't know me, Clarissa. And apparently, you don't know your brother either." Clarissa smiled coldly, opening the folder she held. "Let's just say I did some research on you. For example, the real cause of your husband's death. It wasn't exactly a common accident, was it?" Elena paled. "What are you talking about?" "The police report indicates there was alcohol in his blood. Negligence, disregard for safety rules. The construction company denied full insurance payment, leaving you in financial difficulties. Correct?" Elena's hands trembled. Javier's death was too painful a matter, especially the details she preferred to protect from little Lupita. "That doesn't change anything about who I am," Elena stated firmly. "Perhaps not," Clarissa conceded. "But it changes perception. Imagine how Ricardo would feel knowing you hid that. A man who lost his wife in a car accident, now getting involved with a woman whose husband died due to recklessness. Are you threatening me? I'm offering a dignified way out. Accept a generous financial settlement and leave this house before things get complicated. You'll have security to raise your daughter, and Ricardo will be spared another disappointment." The proposal was so insulting that Elena almost laughed. "Do you really think I can be bought? That I would abandon Letitia and Larissa, who are finally flourishing? Then that's how it is," Clarissa concluded coldly. "In that case, you leave me no choice. Ricardo will know everything, not just about your husband, but also about how you manipulated his feelings and the girls." "Do what you think is necessary," Elena replied, standing up. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the truth, no matter how painful, always has more strength than manipulation and fear." As Elena left the library, her racing heart contrasted with her unwavering determination. She knew she needed to talk to Ricardo before Clarissa distorted the facts. What neither of them realized was Letitia hiding behind the heavy curtains, having overheard every word of the conversation. With wide eyes, The girl ran to tell her sister what she had just discovered. Subscribe now to follow this family's journey. Your thoughts on Clarissa's revelation? That night, Elena waited for the girls to fall asleep before seeking Ricardo in his office. Her heart beat fast as she gently knocked on the door. "Come in," came the reply, and she found Ricardo behind his desk, reviewing documents. "Can we talk?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Ricardo immediately noticed her tense expression. "Is something wrong? I need to tell you something about my past, about how Javier really died." Over the next few minutes, Elena revealed the complete story. Javier's struggle with alcoholism, how he drank secretly during work hours, how he ignored safety protocols on the fatal day, how the investigation concluded there was negligence and the construction company paid only a fraction of the insurance. "Clarissa found that out," she concluded, "and she threatened to tell you if I didn't leave the house. I wanted you to know from me, not through distorted insinuations." Ricardo remained silent for a moment, processing the information. "Why didn't you tell me before? It's not something I talk about easily. I try to protect the image Lupita has of her father. And frankly, I didn't see how that would be relevant to my job here." "But it is relevant to us," Ricardo replied softly, "to what's happening between us." Elena felt her face warm. It was the first time either of them had openly acknowledged their growing connection. "Yes," she admitted, "and I was afraid that by knowing, you would see me differently." "Elena," Ricardo said, moving his chair closer to her, "we all have complicated stories, parts of our lives that are painful to share. What Javier did doesn't define who you are." The relief she felt at his words was immense. "Thank you for understanding. I also have something to share," Ricardo continued after a moment, "about the accident that took Mariana from me and put me in this chair." He then revealed how, on that fateful night, he and Mariana were arguing in the car about marital problems. How he was driving too fast, distracted by the argument, when the truck appeared. How for years he carried not only grief, but devastating guilt. "That's why I pulled away from the girls," he confessed. "I believed I was an unfit father, that I could hurt them as I had, in my mind, contributed to their mother's death. And Clarissa reinforced that belief. She said I needed structure and discipline to compensate for my failures. At the time, I believed anything that would allow me to function day to day." Elena reached her hand across the table. "You are a wonderful father, Ricardo. You always were. You just temporarily lost touch with that part of yourself." The moment was interrupted by a sound at the door, small footsteps running down the hallway. "The twins," Ricardo murmured, concerned. When they reached the girls' room, they found them sitting on Letitia's bed, huddled together and visibly distressed. "We heard you talking," Letitia admitted when questioned. "About Mom's accident, about you fighting, and about Lupita's dad drinking," Larissa added, her voice trembling. "Aunt Clarissa said bad things to Elena today. We heard." Ricardo and Elena exchanged alarmed glances. The girls had absorbed information that was too complex for their age. "We're scared," Letitia confessed, verbalizing what both felt. "Scared that Elena will leave. Scared that you'll be sad again, Daddy." Ricardo moved his chair closer to the bed, extending his arms to his daughters, who immediately snuggled into him. A gesture of intimacy they hadn't shared in years. "Elena isn't leaving," he promised, looking at her with certainty in his eyes. "And I'll never be that distant father again. What you heard about the accident, those are difficult things, but I want you to know that I loved your mother deeply, even in the difficult times, just as I loved Lupita's father," Elena added, sitting beside them. "People can love each other very much and still have problems, make mistakes." "Do you love Daddy now?" Larissa asked innocently, looking from Elena to Ricardo. The adults exchanged a meaningful glance before Ricardo replied. Yes, darling. We're learning to love each other, in a different but equally special way. Then we can be a family? Letitia questioned, hope evident in her voice. Like in the drawing we made. Elena remembered the drawing she found weeks earlier, all holding hands under the title, My Family. Is that what you want? She asked gently. The twins nodded simultaneously. We want you to stay forever, Clarissa declared, and for Lupita to be our little sister, and we want Daddy to smile more, Letitia added, surprising the adults with her perception. Like he has since you arrived. The conversation continued until the girls, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster, finally fell asleep. When Ricardo and Elena quietly left the room, they found Clarissa in the hallway, obviously having overheard part of the conversation. We need to talk, Ricardo, she said coldly, privately. In the office, Clarissa wasted no time with pleasantries. You're making a monumental mistake. This woman is manipulating you and the girls to gain access to your fortune. It's so obvious it's painful to watch. Enough, Clarissa, Ricardo interrupted firmly. I know what you did today. Threatening Elena, trying to force her out. That ends now. I'm protecting you as I always have since the accident. You're not controlling. There's a fundamental difference. Ricardo adjusted his chair to face her directly. I'm grateful for everything you did when I couldn't be there for my daughters. But that time is over. I'm taking back control of my life and my daughter's upbringing. Clarissa's expression hardened. And that includes an irresponsible relationship with the nanny. Have you really fallen for that trap? What I feel for Elena is genuine, just as what she feels for me. But even if it wasn't, even if it was just a connection between the girls, that would already be reason enough to support her. Did you see my girls smiling, playing, being children for the first time in years? Discipline and structure? They killed their spirit, Clarissa, Ricardo exclaimed, hitting the table. They turned my daughters into traumatized little adults, incapable of expressing emotions or simply enjoying childhood. What we did to them in the name of protection was cruel, Clarissa, and I won't allow it to continue. Clarissa paled, the mask of control finally cracking to reveal the hurt underneath. I gave everything for this family. I put them first, always. I know that, Ricardo replied, softening his tone. And I will always be grateful. But now I need to ask you to respect my decisions as a father and as a man. If you cannot do that, we will have to redefine your role in our lives. The words hung in the air like an ultimatum. Clarissa straightened, regaining her composure. Very well. You've been warned. When everything goes wrong, and it will, don't say I didn't try to prevent it. With that, she left the office, her heels echoing down the hallway like small explosions of contained rage. When Ricardo left the office moments later, he found Elena waiting in the hallway, clearly tense. Is everything okay? She asked. It will be, he replied, reaching for her hand. Clarissa will need time to accept the changes, but we set new boundaries today, and it was necessary. Elena gently squeezed his hand, feeling that they had overcome the first major obstacle on their path together. However, both knew that other challenges would come. The girls' adaptation, the adjustment to a new family dynamic, the outside world with its judgments and expectations. But on that night, under the starry sky of Guadalajara, the promise of a new beginning seemed strong enough to face any storm that came. Share your thoughts. Can a family be forged from shared pain and new love? The following weeks brought a completely refreshed routine to the Sandival mansion. Ricardo reorganized his professional commitments to be more present at home, making a habit of accompanying his daughters at breakfast and returning in time for dinner. The twins, freed from their previous rigidity, visibly flourished, becoming more spontaneous and expressive. The most significant change, however, was in the relationship between Ricardo and Elena. What began as mutual respect had transformed into something much deeper. They now shared family moments naturally, exchanged knowing glances throughout the day, and after the girls fell asleep, they talked for hours on the patio under the stars. Clarissa remained distant, appearing only occasionally and with evident coldness. The twins, once so intimidated by their aunt, now seemed almost immune to her presence, turning their attention mainly to their father, Elena, and Lupita. One afternoon, while the girls played in the garden under Josefina's supervision, Ricardo invited Elena for a walk by the lake. It was the first time they would go out alone as a couple. "It's not a very conventional date," he joked, as his driver took them to the Malecon of Chapala, "but I thought you'd appreciate seeing the sunset from here." "It's perfect," Elena replied sincerely. They walked, she beside his chair, along the long lakeside promenade, where palm trees swayed in the breeze and the lake reflected the orange sky of dusk. They stopped for fresh coconut water, watched local artisans working in their stalls, and conversed without the usual interruptions of home life. You know what I'm realizing?" Ricardo commented, as they watched fishing boats returning on the horizon. "That I haven't felt this way in a long time. Simply present, in the moment, not thinking about the past, or worrying about the future." "I understand perfectly," Elena agreed. After Javier died, every day was just about surviving, making sure Lupita had the basics. There was no room to simply live. He took her hand, a gesture that was becoming more and more natural between them. "You changed everything, Elena. For me, for the girls. You brought life back into our home. I didn't do anything alone. You were ready for change, Ricardo. I just, perhaps, was the catalyst. Much more than that," he gently disagreed. "You showed me that my physical limitations don't define who I am as a father or as a man. You made me rediscover parts of myself I thought were lost forever." As the sun sank into the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ricardo turned his chair to face her directly. "Elena, I know it may seem soon, that we're still getting to know each other, but I'm certain of what I feel. I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love." The declaration, though somewhat expected, made Elena's heart race. "Ricardo, You don't need to answer now," he gently interrupted. "I know there's a lot to consider. You still carry Javier in your heart, just as I carry Mariana in mine. We are two people marked by loss, responsible for children who depend on us. It's not a simple situation." "Nothing worthwhile is ever simple," Elena replied, repeating words he himself had once used. "And the truth, Ricardo, is that I'm also in love with you, in a way I didn't think was possible again." The smile that lit up his face was like a sunrise, full, radiant, transformative. Gently, he pulled her closer, and there, under the purple sky of Guadalajara, they exchanged their first kiss, a kiss that carried promises of healing, of new beginnings, of a future neither of them had imagined possible just a few months ago. When they returned to the mansion, they were met by Lupita running towards them, holding a drawing. "Mama, Uncle Ricardo, look what I made," she exclaimed, holding up the colorful paper. The drawing showed 5 figures holding hands. Clearly Ricardo in his chair, Elena beside him, the twins, and Lupita, all under a big yellow sun. At the top, in colorful, uneven letters, was written "My family." Elena felt tears in her eyes, seeing how her daughter had already fully embraced this new reality. Ricardo also seemed moved, pulling the little girl onto his lap. "It's beautiful, little princess," he praised. "Can we hang it in the living room?" "Yes," Lupita enthusiastically agreed. "And there's another one Letty and Laurie made too. They're waiting for you in the living room to show you." Upon entering, they found the twins waiting anxiously, holding another drawing, a more elaborate version of the same theme, with careful details that included the house, the pool, and even a dog, an unfulfilled wish that was beginning to be mentioned frequently. "Did you enjoy your walk?" Letitia asked, with a knowing little smile. "It was wonderful," Ricardo replied, exchanging a complicit glance with Elena. "And you? How was your afternoon?" "The three of us decided something," Clarissa announced, with the adorable seriousness of her 7 years. "We want to be real sisters." Elena and Ricardo exchanged surprised glances. "How so, darling?" Elena asked. "Well," Letitia explained patiently, as if talking to very slow adults. "For us to be real sisters, you two need to get married. So we decided that's what you should do." Ricardo couldn't contain a laugh, while Elena covered her face in a mix of embarrassment and amusement. "That's not how it works, girls," he tried to explain. "Those decisions take time. Adults need to." "But you already love each other," Clarissa interrupted, confused. "We saw, and we love each other too. So what's the problem?" The children's logic, so direct and simple, left the adults momentarily speechless. "There's no problem at all," Elena finally replied, kneeling down to the girls' level. "We just need to do things at the right time. But yes, we love each other, and we love you three more than anything." "So are we going to be a real family someday?" Letitia asked, hope evident in her eyes. "We already are a real family," Ricardo affirmed, surprising everyone with the certainty in his voice. "Family isn't just about official papers or ceremonies. It's about love, respect, and mutual care, and that already exists between us." The simple yet profound words seemed to satisfy the girls, who then returned to their drawings and games. But for Elena, they carried a special meaning, the confirmation that regardless of the pace or form their relationship took, Ricardo's commitment to her and Lupita was already absolute. That night, after the girls were in bed, they sat on the patio as usual, but with a new intimacy, their fingers intertwined comfortably. "About what the girls said," Ricardo began. "I want you to know, there's no pressure. We can take this at our own pace." "I know," Elena smiled, "but they're right about one thing. We're already a family, aren't we? In a way, none of us could have foreseen when we met." "In the best way possible," he agreed, leaning in to kiss her softly under the starry sky of Guadalajara. The next month passed like a happy dream for everyone in the Sandoval mansion. The changes that had started shyly now blossomed fully. The twins laughed loudly through the hallways. Ricardo actively participated in all family decisions, and Elena and Lupita felt completely integrated into the home. One of Ricardo's greatest joys was seeing how his daughters gradually shed the rigidity and formality Clarissa had imposed on them. Letitia, once so serious, now smiled more frequently, and occasionally even allowed herself moments of childlike mischief. Clarissa, who had always feared making mistakes, now experimented with new hobbies with enthusiasm, from drawing to gardening, fearless of failure. Lupita, for her part, thrived with the attention of her older sisters, absorbing their knowledge and manners like a sponge. It was common to find her trying to imitate the way Letitia organized books, or how Larissa styled her hair. One afternoon, while Elena tidied the girls' room, she found a carefully written list in Letitia's handwriting. Things families do. Sunday walks, eat dinner together. Every day, read bedtime stories, take photos on special dates, have a pet. The last item was circled several times and followed by multiple exclamation points. Elena smiled, realizing that this particular wish had been mentioned with increasing frequency. That night, during dinner, she decided to address the matter. "I found an interesting list today," she casually commented. It seems someone at this table is very interested in having a pet. The twins exchanged knowing glances before Clarissa gathered her courage. We always wanted a dog, she admitted. But Aunt Clarissa said animals bring dirt and mess, and that we wouldn't be responsible enough, Leticia added. I always had dogs when I was a kid, Ricardo commented, his gaze distant with memory. Mariana and I talked about adopting one before the accident. I want a puppy too. Lupita joined the chorus, clapping excitedly. Elena looked at Ricardo, a silent question in her eyes. He smiled, nodding slightly. Well, I think we could consider the possibility, Elena suggested. But having an animal is a big responsibility. We'd need to set clear rules about who would do what to care for it. The three girls' eyes shone with renewed hope. We can research different breeds, Leticia suggested, always the planner. And we can visit the animal shelter, Clarissa added. Josefina said there are many puppies waiting for families. How about we do that next weekend? Ricardo proposed, receiving enthusiastic shouts of approval, while the girls animatedly discussed names and breeds. Ricardo discreetly held Elena's hand under the table. This is going to be chaotic, you know, he murmured with a smile. Life with children always is, she replied. But happy chaos is much better than sad order, don't you think? The comment hit him deeper than she could imagine. For years, he had allowed Clarissa's obsession with order and control to suffocate his daughter's natural joy. The simple wisdom in Elena's words illuminated even more clearly the mistake he had made. 2 days later, as Elena helped the girls with research on dog breeds suitable for apartments, already anticipating that they might eventually move to a more modest place, Josefina entered the study room with a worried expression. Miss Elena, there's a lawyer in the reception room. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Confused and slightly alarmed, Elena asked Josefina to stay with the girls and headed to the reception room. There she found a middle-aged man in a formal suit, who introduced himself as Clarissa Sandivals' legal representative. Miss Flores, he began after formal greetings, I'm here to discuss a delicate matter. My client is concerned about her niece's well-being and about certain changes in the family dynamic that may be harming their development. What exactly are we talking about? Elena asked, maintaining her calm despite the alarm ringing in her mind. Miss Sandoval believes your romantic involvement with Mr. Ricardo is creating an improper situation, considering your position as an employee in this house. Furthermore, she has evidence that the girls are being deprived of the necessary educational structure and discipline for their proper development. Elena took a deep breath, controlling her rising indignation. Mr. Mendez, with all due respect, the relationship between Ricardo and me is consensual and adult. As for the girls' education, all decisions are made by their father, who has full and complete mental and legal custody. I understand your position, the lawyer replied with false sympathy. However, my client is considering requesting a judicial evaluation of the situation, possibly seeking shared custody of her nieces. The shock of the threat was like a punch to the stomach. Based on Mr. Sandoval's history of emotional instability after the accident, documented by several professionals during his recovery, and on the legitimate concern that his physical condition limits his ability to adequately raise 2 active girls. The calculated cruelty behind the strategy left Elena momentarily speechless. To use Ricardo's wheelchair against him was too low even for Clarissa. That's absurd, she finally managed to say. Ricardo is an extraordinary father, completely capable, and the girls have never been happier and healthier. These are matters for a judge to evaluate, Miss Flores. The lawyer stood up, smoothing his impeccable suit. I'm simply here as a professional courtesy, to suggest that it might be in everyone's best interest to find an amicable agreement before things escalate to the judicial level. My client would be willing not to proceed with the case if certain changes were implemented. What kind of changes? Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. A return to the previous educational structure, and naturally the end of your personal involvement with Mr. Sandival, ideally with your departure from this residence. Blackmail, in other words. The lawyer smiled coldly. I prefer to call it preemptive negotiation. Think about it, Miss Flores. A custody battle can be extremely traumatic for children, especially those who have already suffered significant losses. After the lawyer left, Elena remained in the room, trembling with indignation. The idea that Clarissa would use her own nieces as pawns in her power play was revolting. Worse still was thinking about the impact a court case would have on the twins, who were finally beginning to heal from their previous traumas. When Ricardo returned from work that afternoon, she waited for him in the office to share what had happened. She wouldn't do that, he initially said, incredulous. Use my paraplegia against me in court. Not even Clarissa would stoop that low. The lawyer seemed quite confident, Elena replied sadly. Ricardo ran a hand over his face, frustration evident. What does she want, after all? Control? Power? The girls were never a priority for her. They were just extensions of her obsession with perfection and order. She's scared, Elena suggested, of losing the influence she had, of becoming irrelevant to you. Perhaps, in her distorted way, she truly believes she's protecting the girls. Protecting them from what? From happiness? From love? Ricardo maneuvered his chair to the window, watching the girls play in the garden. Look at them, Elena. Have you ever seen them so free, so genuinely happy? Never, she agreed, placing a hand on his shoulder. And that's why we need to fight. Together, Ricardo covered her hand with his resolve strengthening. I won't allow Clarissa to destroy what we've built. If she wants war, I'm ready. But first, he turned his chair, facing Elena with renewed determination. First, I want to strengthen our foundation. What do you mean? Elena Flores, would you do me the honor of marrying me? The proposal, so unexpected in that moment of crisis, left her momentarily speechless. I know it's not the most romantic moment, Ricardo continued with a small smile. And I promise to do this properly later, with a ring and everything. But I want you to know that, regardless of what Clarissa tries, my commitment to you and our family is absolute. Elena felt tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a deep, unshakable certainty. Yes, she replied simply. Yes, I want to build this life with you, face whatever comes, together. That night, they gathered the girls in the living room to share both the difficult news and the good. In words appropriate for their age, they explained that Aunt Clarissa was unhappy with the changes in the family and might try to cause problems. Does she want us to go back to how it was before? Letitia asked, alarmed. With all those rules and not being able to laugh loudly? She'll try, Ricardo replied honestly. But we won't let her. This is our family now, and we'll fight for it. And there's other news, Elena added, exchanging a look with Ricardo. We've decided to get married. The reaction was exactly what they expected. Shouts of joy, enthusiastic jumps, and a sea of questions about dresses, cakes, and yes, whether they could adopt the dog before or after the ceremony. Later, when the girls finally fell asleep, all together in the twins' room, as they insisted on a sleepover to celebrate, Elena and Ricardo remained on the patio, gazing at the Guadalajara night sky. It's not going to be easy, he commented, holding her hand. Clarissa won't give up without a fight. Nothing truly worthwhile ever is, Elena replied, gently squeezing his fingers. But together, we're stronger than any obstacle. And as they watched the stars, both felt the same deep certainty that the foundation they had built, based not on blood or legal documents, but on daily choices of love and care, was strong enough to withstand any storm that came. Comment your thoughts on this courageous stand. What does family mean to you? Clarissa's threat was not long in coming to fruition. Just 3 days after the lawyer's visit, Ricardo received an official summons. His sister was formally requesting shared custody of the twins, based on allegations of emotional instability and physical limitations that supposedly prevented him from providing a suitable environment. "This is too low, even for Clarissa," Ricardo commented, reading the documents with growing indignation. "Using my physical condition against me after everything we've been through as a family?" Elena, sitting next to him in the office, felt the same outrage, but remained focused on practical solutions. "What did your lawyer say?" "That the allegations are legally weak. Paraplegia doesn't make me incapable of raising my daughters, and we have extensive documentation on the girls' emotional and academic improvement in recent months." "Then why does Clarissa think she can win?" Ricardo sighed heavily. "Because she's persistent and has influential contacts, and because custody battles, even when unfounded, can be draining and traumatic for everyone involved. She's betting I'll give in to protect the girls from a long process." That afternoon, while the girls practiced swimming in the pool, the doorbell rang. Josefina, visibly uncomfortable, announced that Clarissa was in the reception room, insisting on speaking with both of them. "Let's get this over with," Ricardo decided, and he and Elena went together to confront the woman who threatened their newfound happiness. Clarissa waited, impeccably dressed, exuding a frosty confidence that contrasted with the palpable tension in the room. "Ricardo, Elena," she greeted with false cordiality. "I imagined you'd like to discuss an amicable resolution before things become public." "There's nothing to discuss, Clarissa," Ricardo replied firmly. "Your allegations are absurd and cruel, using my paraplegia against me." "Seriously? I'm not using anything against you, brother," she retorted softly. "I'm just expressing legitimate concerns about my niece's well-being. The last time you interfered with their established routine, you had a depressive relapse that affected them deeply. That was 3 years ago, right after the accident," Ricardo argued. "A completely different situation. And as for your physical limitations, can you really keep up with 2 active 7-year-olds without constant help?" Her gaze slid to Elena. "Or do you completely rely on staff for the girls' basic needs?" Elena felt her blood boil at the insinuation, but Ricardo replied before she could. "My paraplegia doesn't define my abilities as a father, Clarissa. I have resources, adaptations, and yes, people who support me, like any single parent, wheelchair-bound or not." "And what about the emotional stability the girls need?" Clarissa continued, ignoring the argument. "An impulsive romance with the nanny, which will probably end like so many other post-trauma cases, leaving the girls abandoned again." "Enough," Ricardo interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "I came here hoping we could resolve this as civilized adults, as family. But I see you've already decided your course of action." "I can always reconsider the lawsuit," Clarissa offered. "If we return to the original arrangement, the structured routine for the girls, the proper separation between employees and family." "What if I married Elena?" Ricardo asked abruptly. "If she were no longer an employee, but my wife and legally the girl's stepmother?" The question clearly caught Clarissa off guard. Her face froze momentarily before she regained her composure. "A rushed marriage would only prove my point about your emotional impulsiveness," she argued, but her tone no longer carried the same conviction. "Actually," Elena calmly intervened, "Ricardo and I were already planning to get married even before your legal threats. Not out of impulse, but because we love each other and because our daughters have already formed deep bonds." The mention of our daughters made something darken in Clarissa's eyes. "They are not your daughters," she said coldly. "They are my nieces, my own flesh and blood." "Blood is not the only bond that matters, Clarissa," Ricardo replied. "The girls chose Elena, as did I, and they will continue to have her in their lives if you allow this relationship to be based on love, not on control. This isn't over, Clarissa declared, abruptly standing up. You don't understand what you're doing. The consequences. The only consequences I'm concerned about, Ricardo interrupted, are the ones your actions will have on our daughters. Think about it, Clarissa. Do you really want to drag them through a lengthy and painful court case? Expose them to psychological evaluations and interrogations? All that just to maintain your control over a family that isn't yours? The words hit Clarissa like a physical blow. For a moment, her mask of coldness fell, revealing something surprisingly vulnerable. You don't understand, she murmured. After the accident, they needed me. You needed me. It was the only thing that kept me going after losing Mariana, too. The unexpected confession silenced the room. It was the first time Clarissa admitted that the loss of her sister-in-law had also deeply affected her. Clarissa, Elena said gently, surprising everyone, even herself. No one is trying to exclude you. You can continue to be a loving aunt, an important presence in the girls' lives, just in a different way, as part of the family, not as controller of it, Ricardo completed, his voice softening. For a long moment, Clarissa remained motionless, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Finally, without another word, she picked up her purse and headed for the door. Before leaving, however, she turned one last time. Your daughters deserve stability, she said, her voice lower. If you truly believe this new family configuration will provide that, then, she paused, visibly unable to fully concede, I will reconsider my legal options. With that, she left, leaving Ricardo and Elena in a silence laden with contradictory emotions. Relief, cautious hope, and a new understanding of Clarissa's complex motivations. Do you think she'll give up? Elena finally asked. I don't know, Ricardo replied honestly. But I saw something in her eyes today, a crack in the armor, and I think for the first time she really saw me. That night, when the girls were already in bed, Ricardo received an email from Clarissa's lawyer informing him that she had withdrawn the shared custody request for now, but requesting formal guarantees of regular access to her nieces. It's a start, he commented, showing the message to Elena. An acknowledgement that perhaps there's a better path than a legal battle. And what about us? Elena asked, intertwining her fingers in his. Do you still want to go through with the wedding plans, even without Clarissa's immediate pressure? Ricardo pulled her closer, his eyes conveying absolute certainty. More than ever. Not just because I love you, but because I see how you love my daughters. How all three girls, yes, including Lupita, flourish together. I want to build something permanent, Elena. A family we choose to create together, regardless of blood or circumstances. Elena felt a wave of love so intense it almost took her breath away. Leaning in, she kissed him softly, sealing the silent promise of a shared future. Not a future without challenges, certainly, but one they would face together, strengthened by the love they had found when they least expected it. Well, it looks like we have a wedding to plan, she smiled against his lips. And a dog to adopt, he added with a smile. Let's not forget the priorities. The shared laughter that followed carried the lightness of renewed hope, the certainty that, even in the most difficult moments, they had found something precious and rare. A second chance at love, a new definition of family, and the courage to build something beautiful from the ashes of the past. Like this video if you believe in the power of forgiveness and new beginnings. In the weeks that followed, the Sandival mansion was filled with wedding preparations. Ricardo and Elena had decided on a simple but meaningful ceremony to be held in their own garden, with just close friends and family. The twins and Lupita enthusiastically got involved in the planning, offering suggestions on flowers, music, and especially the special role they would play as flower girls. One afternoon, while discussing final details with the decorator, Ricardo received a call that instantly changed his expression. "What? When?" he asked, his face paling. "We're going there now." Hanging up, he turned to Elena with a grave expression. "Clarissa was in a car accident. She's at the civil hospital." Leaving Josefina with the girls, they immediately went to the hospital. On the way, Ricardo explained that according to doctors, Clarissa had lost control of her car on a curve of the road to Chapala, colliding with the road divider. Her injuries were serious, but not fatal. At the hospital, they found her in a private room, connected to monitors, and with her right arm and leg in casts. Despite her injuries, she maintained her usual dignified posture, though her eyes revealed the vulnerability her demeanor tried to hide. "You didn't need to come," she said when they entered, her voice weaker than usual. "It was just a silly accident." "Your family, Clarissa," Ricardo replied simply, maneuvering his chair closer to the bed. "Of course we'd come." Something in the term family, or perhaps in the genuine concern on her brother's face, seemed to break a barrier in Clarissa. Unexpected tears filled her eyes, which she quickly tried to conceal. "The doctors say I'll be discharged in a few days, but I'll need care for a few weeks. I've already contacted a private nurse to—" "You'll come to our house," Elena firmly interrupted, surprising both Clarissa and herself. "We have plenty of space, and Josefina can help with your care." "I can't accept that," Clarissa weakly protested. "After everything." "Exactly because of everything," Ricardo insisted. "It's time to heal old wounds, Clarissa. All of them." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions: regret, hope, the slow dismantling of defenses built over years. "The girls asked about you," Elena commented softly. "They were worried when they heard about the accident." Even after how I treated them?" Clarissa asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Children have an incredible capacity to forgive," Elena replied with a gentle smile. "Especially when they know they are loved, even if the love is expressed in complicated ways." 3 days later, Clarissa was settled into one of the guest suites at the Sandivals mansion. The children, initially excited, then began to visit their aunt's room, bringing drawings, telling school stories, and occasionally even letting Lupita take care of her, which usually meant awkwardly arranging pillows and offering water with the seriousness of a miniature nurse. To everyone's surprise, Clarissa responded with patience and gradually with increasing affection. It was as if physical vulnerability had broken down emotional barriers that years of arguments had failed to penetrate. One night, as Elena helped Clarissa settle in for sleep, the older woman suddenly gripped her arm. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice carrying an unusual urgency. "Something I've been holding on to for a very long time." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, giving her full attention. "On the night of the accident, the night Mariana died and Ricardo became paraplegic," Clarissa began, her voice almost a whisper. "I knew they had argued. In fact, I had contributed to the argument." Elena remained silent, sensing that Clarissa needed to unburden herself of something she carried like an enormous weight. Mariana had discovered she was pregnant again. She was so happy, but I convinced her that Ricardo wouldn't be pleased, that he was already too busy with work, that he barely had time for the twins. Tears began to stream freely down her face. I planted doubts, Elena. Doubts that led to the argument in the car that night. Doubts that contributed to the accident. The confession hung heavily between them, explaining so much about Clarissa's subsequent behavior. The obsessive control, the need to protect her nieces, the hostility towards any potential mother figure. "Why are you telling me this now?" Elena gently asked. "Because I saw how you love the girls, how you love Ricardo, despite his physical limitations. How you created a family where before there was only pain. Clarissa wiped away tears with the back of her hand, and I realized I spent years trying to compensate for my guilt, not realizing I was only causing more harm. Elena thought carefully before replying. Clarissa, I cannot absolve you of that guilt, but I can say that we all make mistakes, some with more serious consequences than others. What matters is what we do from them. Do you think Ricardo could forgive me if he knew? I think he has already forgiven a lot, even without knowing all the details, Elena responded honestly. But the real question is, can you forgive yourself? The question went unanswered verbally, but something in Clarissa's gaze, a mixture of old pain and fragile hope, suggested that perhaps, finally, she was ready to try. The next morning, Ricardo found Clarissa already awake when he went to check on her before breakfast. I need to tell you something, she said as he entered. Something I should have said a long time ago. Over the next hour, Clarissa recounted the entire story. Her interference before the accident, the crushing guilt she felt afterward, and how that guilt had shaped her subsequent actions. Ricardo listened in silence, his face registering a succession of emotions: shock, pain, gradual understanding. When she finished, tears flowed freely down both their faces. For years, he finally said, I carried my own guilt for that night. Driving angrily, arguing instead of listening, not realizing you carried a similar burden. You have every right to hate me, Clarissa murmured. I don't hate you, Clarissa, Ricardo replied softly. How could I? You are my sister, and although your actions contributed to that night, the accident itself was exactly that. An accident. The truck driver fell asleep. I was driving too fast. Mariana was emotionally overwhelmed. It was a perfect storm of circumstances, not just your interference. Still, what I did afterward, trying to control everything, pushing away anyone who might threaten my position, came from fear and guilt, Ricardo concluded for her. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. At that moment, the room door opened, and the three children entered shyly, carrying a breakfast tray they had prepared, with Josefina's help, for Auntie Clary, as Lupita had begun to call her. Seeing the adults' faces, Letitia hesitated. Are we interrupting? No, darling, Ricardo smiled, discreetly wiping away tears. Actually, you arrived at exactly the right time. We were talking about family and forgiveness. Is Aunt Clarissa going to live with us? Clarissa asked hopefully, placing the tray on the nightstand. Ricardo looked at his sister, a silent question in his eyes. Clarissa seemed momentarily surprised, then deeply moved. I'd love to visit often, she replied carefully. If you'd like. And will you come to Mommy and Daddy's wedding? Lupita asked, awkwardly climbing onto the bed to sit beside Clarissa. The naturalness with which she now called Ricardo Daddy, something that had recently begun, still surprised the adults. If I'm invited, Clarissa replied, looking uncertainly at her brother. Of course you're invited, came Elena's voice from the doorway, where she watched the scene with a full heart. In fact, if you're recovered in time, we'd like you to be our maid of honor. The invitation, as unexpected as it was sincere, deeply touched Clarissa. For the first time in many years, a genuine smile lit up her face, softening her features and revealing vestiges of the young woman she was before tragedy and guilt hardened her heart. It would be an honor, she replied simply, as the children chatted animatedly about the wedding preparations, now including their aunt's special participation. The adults exchanged meaningful glances, not of total resolution, for some wounds were too deep to heal completely, but of a new understanding, and perhaps more importantly, of a path forward that included everyone. That night, when the children were in bed and Clarissa was resting, Ricardo found Elena on the patio, their usual refuge for important conversations. Did you know, he asked, About what Clarissa told me? She told me last night, Elena confirmed. I believed I should hear the rest directly from her. Ricardo took Elena's hand, his eyes reflecting the soft starlight. When I think of everything that happened to bring us to this moment, the tragedy, the pain, the mistakes, the second chances, it seems almost impossible. Or perhaps, Elena gently suggested, it's exactly how it should be. Not the painful events themselves, but the path we choose from them, the people we decide to be, despite everything. Ricardo smiled, recognizing the profound truth in her words. Do you know what impresses me most about you, Elena Flores? Your ability to transform even the most difficult experiences into opportunities for growth and healing. I learned that from Lupita, she replied with a smile. Children have incredible resilience, an ability to find joy even in the most challenging circumstances. We adults just need to observe and learn. As they conversed under the starry Guadalajara sky, both felt they had passed a final test, not just of their love for each other, but of their collective ability to build a family based on truth, forgiveness, and genuine acceptance. A family not defined by blood or by the absence of conflict, but by the conscious choice to love, despite the imperfections and wounds they all carried. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. Share your thoughts below. What does true family mean to you? The wedding day dawned with a perfectly blue sky over Guadalajara. The Sandoval mansion's garden had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with arches of white and blue flowers, delicate ribbons swaying in the breeze, and a central aisle created between white chairs, carefully arranged. In the main suite, Elena was finishing getting ready with the help of Josefina and a professional makeup artist. Her dress, an off-white with lace details, was elegantly simple, like herself. "You look beautiful, Mama," exclaimed Lupita, who was already wearing her flower girl dress, a miniature version of her mother's gown. "Thank you, my love. You look dazzling too," Elena replied, adjusting the crown of tiny flowers in her daughter's hair. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Letitia and Clarissa, also dressed as flower girls, their blonde hair styled in elaborate braids intertwined with flowers. "Wow," Clarissa exclaimed upon seeing Elena. "You look like a real princess." "Daddy's going to be speechless," Letitia added with adult seriousness. The twins had blossomed remarkably in recent months. Letitia, always the more serious and analytical, now smiled more frequently, and occasionally even allowed herself moments of childlike mischief. Clarissa, for her part, had developed a confidence she previously lacked, expressing her thoughts and feelings without the constant fear of judgment. Another knock at the door revealed Clarissa, surprisingly elegant, even with her arms still immobilized after the accident. Wearing a teal dress that complemented her eyes, she looked younger and lighter than at any time since Elena had met her. "You are absolutely radiant," Clarissa commented, approaching to adjust Elena's veil. The gesture, so unexpectedly affectionate, symbolized the gradual transformation in their relationship. They weren't exactly friends. Perhaps they never would be entirely, but they had found a mutual respect based on understanding and shared love for the same family. "Thank you for being here today," Elena responded sincerely. "It means so much to all of us." A small smile touched Clarissa's lips. "Who would have thought, right? A few months ago I was trying to kick you out of this house, and now I'm helping you officially become part of it." Elena completed with a wry smile. The children, absorbed in their own excitement, didn't notice the moment of connection between the women, but Josefina, discreetly observing from the other side of the room, felt her eyes well up. Having witnessed the entire journey from the beginning, she perhaps best understood the magnitude of that transformation. Downstairs, in the exquisitely decorated garden, Ricardo waited by the makeshift altar, impeccable in his navy suit. Beside him, Max, the golden retriever the children had adopted from the local shelter 3 weeks prior, sat obediently, wearing a bow tie matching his new owner's suit. The guests, a select group of close friends and some family members, already occupied their chairs. Among them were Elena's parents, who had traveled from the Highlands, still visibly amazed by the scale of the mansion and the fairy tale their daughter's life had become. When the soft music began to play, everyone turned to the start of the aisle. First came the 3 flower girls, Letitia, Clarissa, and Lupita, scattering white rose petals along the path with radiant smiles. Then, to everyone's surprise and emotion, Clarissa slowly walked down the aisle. And then, finally, Elena emerged, radiant in her white dress, escorted by her father. The expression on Ricardo's face as he saw her was one of pure admiration and love. When she reached the altar, he held her hands in his eyes conveying more than any words could express. The ceremony was simple and deeply moving. When it was time for the vows, Ricardo spoke first. "Elena, when you first entered our home, you brought light to a place that had become somber. I promise to love you and Lupita every day of my life, to be the father she deserves and the partner you chose. Our family was not born of blood, but of the daily choice to love, despite the scars we all carry." With tears in her eyes, Elena replied, "Ricardo, you taught me that new beginnings are possible, that families can be built in many ways. I promise to stand by you in all challenges, to love your daughters as my own, and to build with you a home where everyone can flourish, being exactly who they are." When the rings were exchanged and the celebrant declared them husband and wife, applause and tears of joy filled the garden. The 3 children ran to hug the newlyweds, forming a perfect circle of love and belonging. 6 months after the wedding, the Sandivals Flores family was gathered on the mansion's patio, enjoying a sunny Sunday afternoon in Guadalajara. Ricardo and Elena watched the children playing in the garden with Max, the Labrador, who had become an indispensable member of the family. "Who would have imagined we'd get here?" Ricardo commented, holding his wife's hand. "When you showed up for that interview, so determined despite all the warnings, the universe has an interesting way of guiding us exactly where we need to be," Elena replied with a smile, watching how Letitia now taught Lupita to play ball, with a patience that would have been unthinkable months earlier. The changes in the children were remarkable to anyone who knew them before. The twins, once so reserved and formal, now laughed freely, wore colorful clothes instead of severe uniforms, and occasionally even allowed themselves small, age-appropriate mischief. Lupita, for her part, had become more confident, absorbing the knowledge and affection of her older sisters like a sponge. Even Clarissa had found a new balance. After fully recovering from the accident, she decided not to return to her old apartment, but to buy a house near the lake, where she hosted her nieces for occasional weekends. Her relationship with Ricardo had healed significantly, and with Elena, she had developed a mutual respect that, if not exactly friendship, was certainly a functional family alliance. "Daddy, Mommy, come see what Max learned," Clarissa called enthusiastically, gesturing to them. Ricardo skillfully maneuvered his chair onto the lawn, with Elena walking beside him. Together, they watched the dog perform the new trick the children had taught him: shake a paw, roll over, and play dead. All in sequence. "Impressive," Ricardo praised, petting the animal's head. "You're excellent trainers." "It was Lupita who taught him the playing dead part," Leticia proudly informed. "She has so much patience." "Just like Mama," Clarissa added, looking at Elena with admiration. These small demonstrations of love and acceptance still deeply moved Elena. The naturalness with which the twins now called her Mama, the implicit trust with which they turned to her for advice or comfort, were daily gifts she never took for granted. That night, when the children finally fell asleep, Lupita in her own room, the twins in theirs, a change that symbolized the development of their individual identities, Ricardo and Elena shared a moment of tranquility on the patio, under the Guadalajara stars. "I received an interesting proposal today," Ricardo commented, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "A beach accessibility program. They want me to be the project ambassador." "That would be perfect for you," Elena responded enthusiastically. "You always mentioned how transformative it was to be able to go back to the beach with the girls. I've also been thinking about transforming part of the construction company into a firm specializing in residential adaptations for people with reduced mobility," he continued, his eyes shining with renewed purpose. "Using my personal experience to help others." "I'm so proud of you," Elena said, leaning in to kiss him softly, "of how you transformed your difficulties into strength." "I learned that from you," he replied. "You transformed Javier's loss into an incredible capacity to love again, to risk your heart." For a moment they remained in comfortable silence, simply appreciating each other's presence and the peace they had conquered together. "Do you know what Letitia asked me today?" Elena finally commented. "If we could have another baby, so Lupita would have a younger sibling, just like she has older sisters?" Ricardo raised his eyebrows, surprised. "And what did you say? That it was a possibility that Mommy and Daddy were considering?" Elena replied with an enigmatic smile. "That families grow in many different ways." Ricardo held her hand, his eyes conveying deep emotion. "Would you seriously consider it? Having a child with me?" "We're already raising 3 wonderful children together," Elena replied softly. "And yes, I would love to expand our family, if that's what we both wish." The kiss they shared under the stars carried promises of a future that continued to unfold in unexpected and beautiful ways. A future built on daily choices of love, forgiveness, and shared growth. In the house they could now truly call home, 5 hearts beat in a harmonious rhythm, not because they were perfect or because life was always easy, but because they had chosen to face both joys and challenges together, transforming a once cold and formal house into a refuge of unconditional love.